We are a strong and independent breed here in Colorado. We have the courage to question authority, to demand changes. The status quo is far less important in Colorado than the concept of right or wrong. We're brave enough to use that pioneer vision to blaze trails not previously traveled. The great state of Colorado is the right place for a new revolution. A peaceful revolution based in common sense. A peaceful revolution that would be open to the truth and be brave enough to make decisions based in truth rather than a willingness to simply accept that which is forced upon us. It is for these reasons and so many more that the time is right for Colorado to once again be the pioneer to making things better in such a way that the rest of the nation will follow suit. I'm sure that we've all noticed that there's a pervasive mood of mistrust of government. This is an earned situation, and there's a long road ahead to reinstate the public trust. With trust, goodwill, reason, and temperance are imperative in showing our prosperity and individual happiness, and all are essential to a peaceful society. I propose a change that will move us in the direction of peace and in the direction of reason. I have a question for you. You think our brave men and women in law enforcement chose their careers to become armed collectors for the state? I don't think so. Not at all. But that's what we forced them to be in many cases. So how do we use our Colorado ingenuity to show the cash-hungry government who's supposed to be in charge and how we will once again seize control? Today, I introduce two ballot initiatives that comprise my campaign that I call Stop the Shakedowns. So, what is a shakedown? A shakedown is an entity of government hyper-enforcing meaningless infractions for the purpose of generating fine revenue payable to themselves. So who does this? Cities, counties, the state, federal government? And in case you're not completely approving of the fact that government attacks us for money, here are a few examples. If a speed trap were about safety, and this guy makes people slow down, why would they arrest him? Because there's some places that they do that. You warn about a speed trap, you're going to go to jail. It's not about the safety, my friends. It's not. It's about the money, and it needs to stop. So, if it were about safety, a visible patrol car in traffic, as I said before, would result in people slowing down. So why hide with unmarked traffic enforcement if we're not about the cash? In several states, there are speeding violations on the books that, for example, in Arizona and New Mexico, if you're going 65 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, yep, they'll give you a ticket. But they've also codified the fact that it's not enough of a danger so that your insurance company can charge you more for the risk. So that is transparent as it gets, I'm pretty sure. So they basically said with that law, it is not about the safety. And so, next. Now we talk about regulation, market conduct exams, and complaint fines. I can tell you my experience. I spent decades as a CEO of insurance companies. And I can tell you that when the Department of Insurance or the Department of anything comes to calling with a market conduct exam, they're going to find something. And I can tell you a personal experience I had. I had a market conduct from the Colorado Division of Insurance a couple years ago. And they were very upset with me. Now, why is that? My rates were all right. The claims were all paid on time. They didn't have anything to fine me on. They were very upset. So what did they do? Well, they came up with trying to find, okay, well, this is a little bit specific, but I'll share it anyway. In Colorado, there is a rule that says you need to have a plan in place in case you pay medical payment claims in excess of 30 days. Well, all of our claims were paid within 10. But no, we didn't have this provision. We didn't need it. $14,000 to the Colorado Division of Insurance. Thank you very much. That's what it was about. If they can't find something wrong, they're going to dig and dig and dig until they can take more money from you. So, what this brings up is the first solution to the problem. Starve the beast. If government is not allowed to receive any revenue from fines in any way, shape, or form, excessive enforcement goes away. Why rob the liquor store if you can't keep the money, right? And that's the way I look at it. We need to pass a law in the state of Colorado that says any, or something to this effect, we're still working on the verbiage, however, if any fine is levied by any city, county, or state entity, it can be fully satisfied with an in-kind donation to a legitimate charity, or if there are any victims, restitution towards those victims. It basically takes away... I really believe that one of the problems we face also with the mood we all have toward law enforcement is because we're afraid that they're just coming to take our money. Well, you know what? Like I say, I don't think they wanted that either. And so this law, which basically would allow people to satisfy their fines with moving their money to a place of their choice, but the person with the gun and the mask can never have the money, then there's no sense in hyper-enforcement. There's no sense. You know what goes away? Speed traps go away. And in addition to that, market conduct exams for regulators are more about finding out if something's really wrong and not about hitting you at gunpoint. I had another issue. Once again, I have lots of experience with regulators. They're my friends. But I can tell you that also the Department of Insurance, or Division of Insurance here in Colorado, is very much into fining. I'll give you an example. Because they get to keep the money. I had a claim where a claim rep failed, allegedly, to ask a customer who was injured, "How are you feeling today?" Literally. Person makes a complaint with the Division of Insurance. And instead of laughing it away, the Division of Insurance sends off a list of 23 interrogatories that you must answer in order and improper or you are in trouble. Then they sent a follow-up list of about 20 more, which went to the wrong address. I was fined $550. And guess who got to keep it? The Division of Insurance. They can't do that if we can pass this law. So really what happens is, it takes away the desire of government to act in a mafioso style to collect cash. And it also means that the spirit of the laws are enforced. You know, and not that all of us are into force, we're really not. But the fact is, some enforcement based on judicious reason is a lot better than just sticking us all up for cash, don't you think? And I'm pretty sure that if we could pass this ballot initiative, not only are we going to prove the pioneers that we are as far as fighting for freedom and being the first at doing things towards freedom, we might just start a national trend toward this. And think about how our legislators are going to think when they realize that the whole country is banding up against their desire to take cash. Colorado Springs, perfect example in speeding tickets. I stick on those because we've all had to deal with them. In Colorado Springs, you get a speeding ticket, you go to court, they will lower the points, but they will never lower the fine. What's it about, my friends? It's about the money, right? So, I really think what happens is it doesn't stop enforcement, it doesn't stop protection, it doesn't stop safety. It stops people from taking advantage of us and taking our money at gunpoint for the purpose of whatever they want to use it for. Now, in my discussions about this, it became obvious to me that if we do this by itself, there's a problem. Problem is, they're going to ramp up civil asset forfeiture, aren't they? Okay? So that is the second point, the second initiative that needs to be introduced with this, is we need to make civil asset forfeiture against the law in the state of Colorado. Another very small cartoon you might be able to see, but we have a drug war bureaucrat with a big old suitcase of money telling the bank robbers to get out of the way, saying, "Step aside, amateurs, I have a deposit to make." So, if only we could stop the drug war at the state level, that'd be even better. So, what I'm hoping is that the Libertarian Party of Colorado will see merit in these initiatives, and we'll get together to work towards getting these things on the ballot and getting them passed, and show an example for the entire United States that, well, to steal a phrase from a movie, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. So, time to take the lead. And just for interest's sake, I will read what we have. You know, these, of course, will require a lot more massaging, but the civil asset forfeiture law says, effective immediately, the state of Colorado and all government jurisdictions within the state of Colorado shall not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Civil asset forfeiture is hereby prohibited in the state of Colorado. And this is the other stop the shakedown rule. In the interest of peaceful cooperation between the people of the state of Colorado and all enforcement entities within the state of Colorado, any and all fines or penalties are not required to be paid to the fining entity. All fines, forfeitures, and penalties are fully satisfied with a payment equal to the fine or forfeiture or penalty by the penalized individual or corporate entity to a person damaged by the activity in question, or a donation to a legitimate charity of the penalized person's choice anywhere in the United States of America. So, this would send a pretty strong message nationwide. If we can pull this off, not only are we going to end a lot of the terrible, terrible things that are done to us, I mean, we need to move government back from just an entity that's trying to get money from us in any way they possibly can. These are strong messages, and I really hope you'll all join me in helping get this thing, make this a reality. So thank you again, and one more slide there. Oh, well, we got our cash generator, and then one more. And one more. There we go. Stand together to stop the shakedowns. And this is what I'm trying to create here. So I hope you all approve. I would encourage you to contact me if you'd like to help push this thing along. But I just think this is just the best thing we could do right now. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention. You all have a great night. Most of you are probably connected with me through Facebook, but that's probably the best way to do that. You know, you can also send an email to steve.kerbel@aol.com, or you can contact me, Steve Kerbel, through Facebook. So that's Kerbel. So thanks again. Any other questions? I think we're good. All right, have a good night. Oh, yes, one more, Eric.
When are you running for governor?
I am not ready to declare at this point. I hope to run, but there's a few hurdles I have to get over. But it is still something I'm exploring, but I am not in a position to declare tonight. Sorry. Anything else? I think we're good.
Guys, I want to tell you a little bit about Steve Kerbel. When he was running for president last year, I called him. We had a newly formed development group in Douglas County. I called Steve to see if he could take a few minutes out of his busy schedule to come speak at our group. He did. Presidential candidate came out to Douglas County just to speak with our little group. He's willing to give of his time and of his efforts. Great guy. Thank you, Steve. Next we have Mr. Mark Goddard. Come on up, Mark.
Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight? All right. Well, before I get started this evening, I wanted to give a special thank you to our host, the Westin Hotel, so if we could all give a round of applause to them and their staff. And of course, one more round of applause to all the people who organized this. It was a nice pleasure to just be a small part of helping this convention. So I want to thank everyone again. Now, as I look around this room, I do see some old-time libertarians. I see some young people interested in liberty. I see a lot of people here for the free lunch. And a few more people interested on how roads are made. But what I'm really interested in is how everybody in this room is involved in liberty. We all care about it, we all want it, we all are active for it. That's why we're sitting at this dinner here tonight. And that makes us a team. We are a team because we have the same common goal. Now sometimes that team can seem like we're the Washington Generals. For those young people, that's the team that played the Harlem Globetrotters who always lost. It can seem like that, but we're looking at the wrong measurements. What we should be looking at is The fact that we have 40,000 registered libertarians in Colorado alone, whereas when I was here in 2006, we had 9,000. 10 years, 5 times over. The fact that we broke 25 of 26 vote total records here in Colorado with our candidates, that's a win. On the national level, we had over 5% for our presidential candidate. That's a win. And it's a win that the majority of our states have ballot access because of that presidential bid. That is a win. And whether you're a radical or you're a big old libertarian, it doesn't matter. We're on the same team. And the team is liberty, and that's what we're here for. But the team needs jerseys. So you're going to pull out your envelope, and you're going to put some money in that envelope. All right? If you don't have one, I'm sure we can find you one. But you're going to put some money in that envelope to help the cause of liberty. Some of you help with your time, but there's a time when you need to help with your money. And tonight is that night to help with your money. So please take a moment, put down your cheesecake, and go ahead and donate what you can for the party, for the cause, for the team. Thank you very much.
Does anyone need a pen? Thank you. Pass it around. Thank you all.
By the way, Mark is the parliamentarian that's been helping us with all the business.
Thank God.
This morning, yeah. He'll be there with us again, keeping us out of trouble.
Does anyone need a pen? Thank you. Pass it around. Do we need a pen?
Next, we have a party member that's been with us for a long time. A lot of you know him. Been around a long time. He's a great guy. He's going to have the opportunity to introduce our panel tonight. Matthew Hess, are you here? I should say, where are you? I'm over here. Come on up, Matthew.
Actually, I have to get out my paper here. Did a whole series of notes on this forum tonight. Overall theme of the convention is Liberty City. Tonight we're going to explore what a Liberty City would look like. In some detail, we'll talk about the ways in which a currently established city would be converted. The structure of this forum will be one of open, organic discussion amongst the members. Hopefully we will answer the questions that are commonly asked, as well as some not so common ones. So I do the introductions, but since they've been introduced so many times tonight, I'm going to steal a page from Gary Johnson and tell you to Google them if you want more information. So Laura Epke, Austin Petersen, Laura, and Steve Bell. Please join me. Take a chair, take a chair. We've got some waters here for you in case you get thirsty. We're going to be up here a little while. We've got some microphones for you as well. Wrong chair, Mr. Petersen. This is kind of like the McLaren hour up here. All right.
Two of them here, another table back here with them.
start with blueprints, let our imagination kind of go. What does a city founded with individual liberty look like as a priority?
Thank you.
In order to start any old city, got to put this right here in my face. We got to start with the location for our city. A good location can break or make a city. In Colorado, we do have some desert, but not many cacti are known for attending planning meetings. So we got to ask the panel, what would a good location for a new city founded upon the principles of liberty be? Where would it be? Where would we go put it? And please don't say a new planet.
There have been some examples in American history, actually, of experimental towns. There was a Roosevelt community. FDR had a community that was to run on socialist principles, and of course, the community failed. But then there were also some more capitalist-style experiments during the 1920s. I believe Henry Ford actually founded South America. He founded Fordlandia in order for him to be able to extract resources. And the resources were rubbish. And in my argument, the reason why I think that this community had so much difficulty wasn't because that they weren't allowed mutual exchange. They certainly were, and they were sponsored by a private corporation, which is the kind of thing that we would like to see. But it was a prohibitionist community. And because Henry Ford had such a problem with his workers, he did not want them to drink alcohol. Right? Just like we see a lot of workers today, they'll say, well, we don't want our workers to engage in certain illicit activities or vices, perhaps. So you can't go Henry Ford returning to the grave. But Ford wanted to create a sort of utopian-style community where he could extract resources and build it, and it failed as well. So I think utopianism is our enemy tonight. We can't make perfect the enemy the good. And there are historical examples of libertarian societies. People don't like when you talk about in some ancient history, but there were the Zirs, the African Zirs, hoplite farmers. The Greeks had a city-state system of no taxation. There were no lords were allowed to tax the Greek farmers, and because they considered that an affront to their personal sovereignty. So tonight, when we talk about what is a Liberty City going to be, I think probably in order for us to satisfy our consumers tonight, they're going to want to hear something that dwells in the realm of the present and the realm of the real. And the closest we've seen is maybe going to Sorry.
Well, also on top of that, if we're going to talk about where we're going to put this city, certainly being a libertarian city, we can't use the principle of eminent domain to take the property either. So, I think that it would be nice to be able to put it in some place that's not developed yet. Start scratch, start clean, maybe get a little bit of mountain, a little bit of plain, a little bit of water, something like that where we can... I don't think that would be either. Or you can leave now. But no, I think it's very, very important. We can take whatever resources we can, and really the best way I can see to start a real libertarian city, really start from scratch.
Yeah, it seems to me like, the problem of eminent domain is certainly there. But if we just pretend like it doesn't exist, or if maybe the government gives us some of the national land that's out there, so we can start up with it and just says, oh, go ahead and have a good time. We need a place, obviously, I come from to this as a Nebraskan, so we need a place where we got water, we need a place, a place where we can grow food, and a place that maybe is out in the middle of nowhere where nobody will bother us.
Gulch.
Yeah, there you go.
I would say that the most important thing a Liberty City needs is sovereignty rights over land. And right now what we have an infinite supply of this, which is being blockaded primarily through your tax money. Right now, any country on earth that has debt, which is basically every country, has two choices. They can sell the sovereign land that they own, much of which is empty, or they can be forced to take a loan from the IMF, basically. And right now, a lot of the foreign aid that we see, the underlying principle, in my opinion, one of the underlying motivations is to prevent the access to that type of sovereign land. And so what I think the first step would be to create a situation where we could, in the modern era, as Austin says, actually get sovereign land, is to shut off 100% of all foreign aid right now. And within months, my prediction would be that we would have many cities willing to sell to realistically groups of investors to pull up enough capital, a square mile, 2 acres of sovereign land that we could use to build a city like this.
Well, so I don't want to prove it. Let me just say this. There was an attempt by some libertarians to form a colony I believe it was it Argentina recently?
I think it was Brazil.
Well, it was Brazil. Well, perhaps it was Brazil, but and it collapsed just because the planners weren't able to create a community. So the dangers of central planning, right? Of course, we face these struggles ourselves. A libertarian community will have to operate in some sort of wider latitude because since we're on planet Earth, we have to operate within some form of regulatory bodies that exist above us. But I guess I'm curious. What do you guys think? I mean, Gulch is really what we're talking about here. I mean, will we have bitcoins or dog coins, or what will be our currency, right? I mean, how do we in that sense start from scratch? Yeah, go for it. Maybe you should come up here and I'll I will.
We do currently have to work within the framework that we have as far as currency and current laws at the federal, state levels and whatnot. So what I was thinking was we may be able to get more accomplished, and I'm glad everyone brought it up, through more of a corporate format. Create a company, as it were, to homestead, similar to the Virginia company or whatnot. And from there, you've got a lot more flexibility as to what you can do, how you procure the land, how you get initial interest, investors, everything else. So the actual act of obtaining the land becomes one of more of a merchant instead of conqueror.
Well, private property rights in the era of the Wild Wild West, which I read a fantastic study by an anarcho-capitalist who wrote for the Mises Institute about it. He called it the not-so-Wild Wild West. Because of the way that land ownership was so readily available, people could homestead. During the gold rush era of the United States, a fantastic case study in American history that the Gilded Age is so reviled by statists, but it provides a fantastic case study for an American history of governance of a more anarchic style of system where the property owners, even women, were allowed to purchase property. In this time of American history, yes, this was revolutionary. And because they weren't allowed to do so back east. Once the settlers crossed the mountains and were allowed to cross the mountains after the revolution, and we had a manifest destiny, which is expansionist, of course. But in that time, in the Gilded Age of American history, of course, we had the Native American genocide at that point. There always seems to be someone who doesn't benefit from our system of gentrification, if you will call it that. But if you are being objective, and you look at the Gilded Age in the 1880s, probably the best president in American history was Grover Cleveland. Somewhat of a non-interventionist on foreign policy, believed in hard metals and currency, opposed the bimetallism era that was coming into play. So if we want to take a good look at American examples in anarcho-capitalism, then I think the Gilded Age is probably a good place to start. Grover Cleveland, even better than Calvin Coolidge in many ways, because Coolidge was very much prohibitionist. So yeah. Take a look at the Gilded Age, 1880s.
Yeah. It was also important that few people have resources. Water, one of the crucial elements of life, is necessary for a society to thrive. It's one of those things that's wars are fought. Society is humble. So what a key element, we need to have a location near resources. Water can be one of the primary, but it can't be the only. So we have to look for other material resources, as you mentioned, within the earth itself, whether we can mine things out or whatnot. It's something that gives the society something to thrive on. Water being, you can create a port or whatnot, but that alone isn't necessarily the elements to a successful city. But we need to move on a little bit here.
Can I take that water question a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
If you look right now at countries that are either very resource rich or very human capital rich, you're seeing that the human capital, the well-educated countries, do much, much better. And so I don't believe that an intensely large amount of resources is necessary. As a simple parallel, if you look right now at Singapore, which doesn't have really a very significant amount of natural resources, it's thriving. Where if you look at Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves on Earth, has a year-round growing season, has some varieties of coffee and cacao that are not found anywhere else, that has precious metals, gold and platinum, diamonds. It has everything, but it has mismanagement. And so I do believe that any kind of liberty city is going to be a free trade city. So assuming that that city has some people that can provide something good to someone, importation, exportation are going to really handle a lot of the resource issues, assuming that that city is not as Austin wants on Mars.
Well, that's actually a good segue to our next step here. That's how we think about other things that encompass a city, utilities, services, how we're going to get the society to start thriving, growing, how people are going to be prosperous, materials in and out, the roads, all those things that we need to have in a successful area. So I'd like to actually explore a little about different ways we've seen innovative cities provide services. One example is LaSalle in Qatar is planning a pneumatic trash removal system through a series of tunnels underground. So there will be no large garbage trucks, no dumpsters, no bins. It's a simple pneumatic system that removes all the trash underneath the city completely free. So we got to start thinking about other
Free?
well, free of interference from humans at that point.
I think the key to that whole thing really is
Not free financially. Come on, give me some.
No, this is not a Bernie Sanders seminar here. No, but I think what's really important is if we're going to be a liberty city, then it has to allow people the opportunity to fall off the grid if they so choose. I think that's very, very important. That's something we're missing. You know, with property taxes, who owns your land? You don't. You know, when it comes to trying to get off of utilities, the fight is so powerful to stop people from getting off. So, first of all, I don't think the other liberty folk in our town is going to have an issue with people falling off the grid, providing their own electricity, their own resources to run their land. Certainly not going to be charging property tax and take the land away in case you don't pay it. So the land really becomes yours. And I think that that's some of the finite foundations of what we would have is the true ability to fall off the grid if they so choose.
There's also, I think that there's an underplayed topic that maybe we as libertarians don't address, but I work in this industry, and most of my personal revenue comes from advertising, right? So I run a couple of websites and podcasts and things like that. And you know, you can make a good living on advertising. Well, we all kind of hate advertising in a sense. Like nobody likes to see the ads that they see on their websites or watch ads on television. But think about this from an economic perspective. You know, I'm not saying slap a bumper sticker on the memorial. But what I'm saying is that, like for example, public buses, right? They can be run many times on the advertising that exists. There's quite a large revenue to the public sector from the advertising industry. Now think of it like this: if I ran a business that took money from libertarians, like maybe let's say I sold T-shirts to libertarians. Well, the problem there is that essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking money, you know, from the libertarian community. But if I run a website where I'm taking money from the advertising community, my money comes from Fifth Avenue, libertarians, the money stays in the movement, essentially, right? And this can operate, this can work in our governmental level. The thing is that when you start talking about how advertising can increase public revenues that's nearly frictionless in terms of its collection process, then people get mad because essentially what you're saying is you're talking like Ron Swanson, right? Like, go to the park, put in a quarter, look at a duck. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to look at New York Central Pond, you need to watch a 30-second advertisement on your mobile phone first, right? No, nobody likes this because it bears itself out as intrusive. But I think that the possibilities are for advertising to be used as a more frictionless way of raising funding for some government projects, some public works, where it calls for it, right? Public places. You know, I'm not saying, again, not to make golden arches on the White House lawn, although I would have done it if I could have made a statement. Because again, I'm not turned off by the corporate, the corporate advertising sense. I play in this world, and part of me thinks it's kind of sexy. Some of it, right? Some of it's raw. Some of it's dirty. Some of it, like in Europe, for example, they have, they'll advertise, softcore pornography on billboards. We don't tolerate that in the United States, right? So there is a certain level of difficulty in terms of how we can use advertising. But the best thing about it is that, again, I know there's no such thing as a free lunch, but it doesn't take money from the community, right? So we're not taxing you. Instead, we're putting advertising in public places. And if anything, the government tries to stamp down. They try to clamp down on advertising. They try and ban it on highways, too many road signs and things like that, when the revenue that's raised can be used for public services. So these are ways to raise funds without, putting a gun in it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was going to be my next question. Really, how can we divide this up so that we have competition in services? And it sounds like, businesses will be willing to invest if they have a monetary gain from it, if they can capitalize on the service in some fashion. And I kind of wanted the panel to take that topic and run with it. Austin beat me to the punch.
One of the things that you'll see in areas where we're talking about infrastructure and we're talking about competition is that when there is a demand for something, the technology comes into existence. And when that demand is combined with both an economic and a pragmatic need, it comes in even more quickly. You want to see an example of people often resist low power things. We're like, we want to use as much electricity as humanly possible. But when it actually makes a difference, for example, in our cell phones, we all use low power screens because we don't want to carry around a generator to run an old style, CRT monitor, wherever we go. As another example to kind of what Austin was saying just now is that in addition to things like advertising, we also have just direct pay resources. You have now solar cells. You have Tesla, the Tesla wall, or I can't remember the name, the wall that Tesla builds, where you can store up electricity. So you don't have any need in the modern era to inherently be on an electrical grid. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. So a lot of these things are being already addressed by the free market. If there was a larger market for them, they would be addressed, in my opinion, even more.
Yeah, I think, when you start talking about the market, the market fixes a lot. And can solve a lot of these problems with, so many of the things that the state does now could be easily done by the market. And the state oftentimes, we don't need occupational licensing. The market works. We don't need, Nebraska, we're a public power state, and we don't need that. You can have lots of people banding together voluntarily to form a small grid to sell excess power. You don't need you don't need to have the state involved.
It said an elected official.
That deserves applause.
Please don't tell my friends in Nebraska that I said that.
That is a perfect segue to the very next thing I wanted to talk about, and that is in Colorado. We have a little thing called home rule. Colorado is one of 30 such states which have amended their constitution. Colorado, look under Article 20 for home rule info, to grant municipalities the ability to exercise local control of their individual governments. Nebraska also has a home rule provision. I think it only is applicable to cities over 100,000 though. So I actually wanted to bring that topic up because I see home rule as a very good doorway into building our Liberty City. So I'll leave that to the panel. You're a Colorado man.
Okay. Well, home rule is a crucial component to Liberty City, merely because if we started our city and we're already entwined with so many laws and regulations and statutes and bulletins and whatever else is out there, then we really don't have the chance to start a city of liberty. We're already encumbered with and weighted down with a ridiculous amount of blockades to achieving what it is we want to achieve. So home rule is key. So I think that with that, it allows us to build our own infrastructure of, what's right and wrong, how do we deal with these things? Do we, we don't need an enforcement monster like what is, I think we need to get rid of already. And I think that certainly home rule is the key. to be able to have any foundation for a real city of liberty. There's no question about it.
One of the branches of libertarianism is called geo-libertarianism, and it was sort of pioneered by Thomas Paine. These are classical liberals who their argument is that all the taxes are really bad, but the least worst tax is a land tax. And the geo-libertarians, they're classical liberal in every other sense, right? But they say if they're going to have some form of tax, it should be on property. The reason they argue this is because everything else in economics is not a zero-sum game. For example, I buy a smartphone, you can have one too. If I'm eating popcorn, you can also have popcorn. Land is sort of one of the only exclusive. This is their argument. I'm not a geo-libertarian, but essentially that because I can deprive you from the use of land, that it's the resource that should be taxed. So I mean, in Liberty City, if there is going to be any form of redistribution, then yeah, I'm not advocating for it. Hey, I'm just representing their views. But geo-libertarians are true liberals in a sense. They're not big government types, but that is their argument. Simply that's the only resource that if I use it, you can't.
I'll add one more thing as well. Is that one of the nice things about being able to start fresh and clean is, there's going to be a spectrum of people within our city of all different socioeconomic strata. And so, right now, there are so many laws on the books all over the country saying, you help the homeless, you're going to jail. You have the homeless stay in your church lot, you're going to jail. You give them a hot meal, you're going to jail. We're not going to have those in our city. That's very, very important.
I think one of the really important things, though, and this is more of a caveat of how we interpret the idea of home rule. Thoreau once said that wouldn't it be nice if government only decided issues of expediency and convenience, but not issues of morality? So, for example, I would be fine, and there's not many people that like less government than me, but I would actually be fine if we got together and voted on what side of the street we're going to drive on, because it's kind of just makes things a little bit easier at a pragmatic level. However, I would absolutely not support, if you have a big city or a small city, for that city or parts of that city to be in charge of things like education, or in charge of things like zone. I mean, the only thing that needs to be decided at any level past the individual are things that by their very nature cannot be decided any other way. And so, number one thing to me is that we try to make this as much of an individual rule city as possible. Individual choice, individual responsibility. You pay for what you want, you buy what you want, you're responsible for what you want. No one owes it to you, and you don't have to buy it for anybody else either.
And I agree with that. And typically, home rule chartered cities have basically carte blanche to go with issues of local concern. That's the key topic, is local concern. What concerns the area locally? Just crime? Does poverty? Does economic success? Particular currency? What are the limits of local concern in my mind? Because all government, as libertarians know, is local. So shouldn't we be focused mostly on things that are local concern and overriding? One of the examples is in Denver, the guns. I believe it's open carry is not allowed in Denver whatsoever because it is a local concern item. Even though it's constitutionally allowed in the rest of the state, pretty much, it's a local concern item. So they're able to circumvent the Constitution. So I figure if they can do that against liberty, we can do it for. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, it all depends on what your state constitution says and what your state constitution allows. In Nebraska, for instance, and I suspect it's probably the same in Colorado, the state is required to provide for education. Now, people have other options, but, okay, so do we have to have public schools in Liberty City? Because we are part of the state and we're subject to the state constitution. Even home rule communities in Nebraska have public schools. And so public schools are a part of it. In Nebraska, Omaha, I think is the only pure, and maybe Lincoln, are the only pure home rule cities. And they have overtly done what Denver has done and put real limitations on gun rights, even though Nebraska's Constitution is very specific about the right to keep and bear arms, specific beyond almost anything else. So, you're right, home rule is a problem, but the question, or is a potential problem, and it's a potential way to be for liberty, but, again, you have to look at what the Constitution of your state says if you're subject to the Constitution of the state.
I would say that a nice way to look at this, if somebody asked me the other day what I liked the most about Uber, which I use a lot, and I said the thing I like the most about Uber is Lyft, because Lyft keeps it in line. And I think the same is true of any type of a city. I think that whether we are doing something with like pure sovereign territory, whether we're doing something in an existing city, whatever it is we're doing, the number one driving force will be, can this city do something better than other cities? Would somebody want to leave the United States of America to come to this city if it wasn't a damn good city? And I think the answer is absolutely not. So I think that one of the big parts is to address some of these issues, is that the people who are organizing this must really adopt a culture of using every means necessary to increase individual liberty. That's something we've seen in our current system. Even the the worst type of government, the federal government, theoretically can, and actually has at times, stepped in to increase liberty. Presidents have pardoned nonviolent drug offenders. And so I do believe that it shouldn't be just like, the smallest thing is always the best. I think it should be whatever we need to do to make there be more freedom is what's always best.
Well, I'm just I tend to go back to foundations a lot, and when I think with this city, one of the things that of course would be crucial is the fact that we use the live and let live attitude anyway. You talk about public schooling, you talk about any type of punishment, you talk about anything that government does, and imagine what the city would really be like if you really could do whatever you want, if you didn't hurt anybody else. And that's what kind of occurs to me when we think about a city of liberty is the absolute freedom to live your life the way you see fit, with nobody trying to take away anything, and trying to pronounce their opinions on you, saying, well, let's say that I was on the island of Curacao a couple of years ago, and it's an interesting story where they made sure that every building in Curacao was painted freshly once every year. Of course, they used the excuse of the weather and the salt air and things like that. The reality is the person who made that rule was the mayor who owned the paint store. So these are the kind of things I think we can avoid when it comes to a Liberty City of live and let live. And that's one of the things that attracts me the most.
We're talking about guns. This isn't an argument that will really sell well, but it's the truth. Sometimes it's not politically correct. But when you talk about open carry of handguns are not that dangerous of a gun. Most people who get shot, who go into emergency wards, if you're shot by a pistol, most people live. And it's amazing that the media has kind of turned them into these murder machines. Like even some of the higher caliber weapons, which, who cares? It's 357 on there, right? Like Dirty Harry's, it doesn't happen. But most of the people are carrying, or if they're open carrying reasonable, something on 40 caliber even, for example. I do a 380 just to conceal, because Missouri got constitutional carry. Sorry, Colorado. We don't need those safety permits. We got, Missouri loves their guns. But the concept is that, we get hyped on threats, right? And that's what sells. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later after this panel tonight. But that we buy into the fear of the media, and the public does. Not us, because, we are the 1%. But the public, when they hear things like, oh my gosh, a pistol on every hip, is this the wild, wild west? And kind of like, yeah, women could buy property. What are you, a bigot? What are you, a bigot? Are you a bigot? How dare you, sir? Yeah. So I'm trans firearm. I like to choose which firearm it is. I'll choose the caliber. Right? Don't tell me I can't carry a 308 Winchester. But, so we had the threat, and the public believes it. So, in terms of, libertarians, we're going to have a better propaganda outlet. I run one. But we need to be able to communicate our ideas better. We're fighting uphill because it gets votes to tell people that these dangerous murder weapons need to get off the street because kids are dying. That's what Hillary Clinton did so frequently in the debates. Was she would stand on the graves of dead children. We don't have the luxury of being able to stand on the graves of people and to use tragedies because we're not trying to take away people's rights. Right? Anyways, I'll go into this more later. So, filibuster.
I'm used to it. Nebraska legislature has a lot of them.
Yeah, I do think there's a very strong cultural and legal perspective to what both Austin and Steve said, and especially when it comes to things like firearms. In any kind of a Liberty City, you need to have that ideology that says, I'm going to be able to take care of myself. I might choose not to carry a weapon, but I at least have the legal ability to carry a weapon. That means, for example, that if I see somebody threatening me tonight, I don't have to wait until next week before I can get a gun. It's something that's very, very deep. Something that Allison actually mentioned earlier that really goes to the core of historical freedom. The Athenian hoplites, the soldiers, that they believe that a person should be a landowner and a soldier and a politician all at the same time. It was that idea of very deep, deep self-reliance. And I think that both in a pragmatic sense of keeping people safe and in a cultural sense of encouraging that type of psychological self-reliance, I do believe that in every way possible, Liberty City should be an absolute constitutional open carry city.
Right, but people think that only the government should have guns. Like, I love the attitude of liberals who say that all cops are evil racists and only they should have guns. Right, but we've gotten away from the sort of the individualistic aspect. It is that kind of American individualism that because okay, well the government is going to be there to protect you, but we don't train our children in firearm use. Right, I think it's radical. It's considered radical when a school comes out and says we're going to teach kids how to use a firearm. It being taught from a young age that it is an implement, a tool, a dangerous implement, one that must be respected, but still that it's just an inner tool, that it matters what's in the arm. A weapon is only as dangerous as the person who wields it. Yeah. So that comes down to issues of mental health and all of that. But and we do have to address those things. My institute, Stonegate Institute, brand new nonprofit, and what we're doing is we're fighting for liberty on a local level. We try, thank you. We go out and we try and find little places where we can actually affect the outcome. We've got one win and one loss, but the loss was a local town council was using zoning regulations to take a tabletop firearms dealer who operated out of their home, family man, it's not just some, gun nut sitting around with his, denim jacket on, and a Confederate flag guy. This is just a normal, family man who sells firearms out of his home. And the local city council and the moms, the soccer moms, got together and said, well, we don't like guns in our neighborhood, and we're going to, and they victimized this family. So there is a desire on the part of some people, especially in the American community, to punish. Right? There is a lust for punishment that we see in American society. So Liberty City, if it exists, is going to have to maybe have an immigration policy. But how do you contend to live in a society where the majority of the people want nothing more than to see their neighbors suffer because they have an ideological disagreement with them?
Well, speaking of guns, by the way, in Liberty City, with the freedoms that we would have, of course we would carry guns if we wanted to as well. My suspicion is because everyone's happy, I don't think we'd be using them a whole lot.
Right. An armed society is a polite society.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? When I carry my gun, I actually feel more sense of responsibility. Right? Like when I walk out in my community, I'm like, there's a very dangerous weapon on me. And if somebody's talking smack or something like that, or if somebody's escalating a conflict, I know that conflict could end in severe violence. I'm glad I have it, but the point is that it instills a sense of responsibility in the user. Not all people, but I think that it does create that sense of responsibility.
So it sounds like overall we could easily insert something into the town charter that says, and it harm none, do what ye will.
I like that. That works.
It is is an issue of local concern for the safety of our citizens to state that. But moving on, I wanted to, first, is everyone familiar with Sandy Springs, Georgia?
For what purpose?
For how it was founded. Okay, and how it operates? Okay, anyone know about Sandy Springs out there?
Privatized.
One person?
Is that the place with the private police force and everything?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think I was talking about.
So the next part of this is really how to convert a city. I think Sandy Springs is an excellent example of that. This is a town founded in 2005 as a suburb of Atlanta. It was really unincorporated area at the time. They voted to incorporate, and overnight it had the instant problem of becoming a city. What do we do? Where do we turn? So they turned to a contractor, CH2M Hill, and basically said, help. And they did. They set up a local government with 2 employees to start and outsourced every single service except police and fire to CH2M Hill. And over the time, since 2005, they have never raised their taxes one time. They have now branched out into multiple competing outsourced vendors, I think 7 now, or 6. Anyway, they saved about $7 million in the process. So the vendors themselves are competing to provide better services than the other vendors.
Who builds the roads?
The vendors. But it operates, they have world-class parks, they have all kinds of stuff there. It's an amazing little city. But unfortunately, lately, there's been some concerns from the business community that they're starting to need some reassurances that things aren't going to change, that they're going to remain the same. Because these businesses, it's now turned into the fastest growing economic area in Georgia ever. So one of the things is that the Sandy Springs area may backslide. They may start bringing more stuff in-house. And to that point, I want to talk about how we can prevent backsliding of our Liberty City. What do we need to have in place? Should we even have the public services, police, fire as part of it? Can we get away with a single manager and that's it? I kind of want to explore this concept and let the panel run with it.
I think one of the best ways to decide what a public sector service should look like is to find the closest private sector parallel and just do pretty much exactly that. And if you look at, for example, things like police and fire that are usually provided publicly, there's actually one area where they are duplicated privately to the point where the public part might not even exist. And right now I'm talking about the casinos in the Strip of Las Vegas. They all have their own security. There is a police, but they're really police. The security is extremely polite. It's nearly invisible because their main goal is to keep you there. They don't want to run you out. And look at what you have in those casinos. You have people who are basically drinking all day long. You have people who are having their fortunes wildly changed. You have like a compacted group of people. You have the recipe for every kind of mayhem. But you don't have the mayhem because you have a private security that's saying, our goal is to make this place pleasant. And the second they see something that might, 2 hours from now, turn into mayhem, they step in and try to separate, just calm it down. And it doesn't feel intrusive, it doesn't feel difficult. The same thing with fire. If there's a fire, God forbid, in the Las Vegas casino, they're not waiting around for the fire department. There will be 50 people on the floor with fire extinguishers in seconds. And the same applies, I believe, if you wanted to see how to make the utilities work, the health services work in a private city, is you should mimic what actually happens when people are doing things going good. As Steve mentioned in that wonderful presentation, right now the police are doing a lot of work. It's not work that we want them to be doing. And if they only did the things that we wanted, you would have something a lot more like a Las Vegas casino. And I think that type of a template in a Liberty City would give us a type of freedom and enjoyment that we're really looking to have.
I think that's a good start. That's one way to approach things. The other way is through voluntary activity. In my legislative district, every fire department in the 33 communities in my district are volunteers. People who have volunteered their time and energy and they're good. They, they leave their work, their workplace to say, yeah, fire call, you go. And they just go do that. And so that's a great model. Like you could do the same thing with, to the extent that you need a police department, you could do the same thing. Have volunteers who, I don't know, marshal the streets if they need to, outside the bars, to make sure that the people who are getting rowdy get home safe. They don't need, if you're not in the business of policing for profit, if you will, in whatever form it takes, then you don't need to have somebody who's not a volunteer. So.
What are the laws determined?
Well, that if you don't have laws, then the police aren't going to be very busy, are they? If you don't have a ton of statutes, So I mean, I think a lot of this stuff can be done voluntarily, in my view. So.
Well, I think also the replacement of what would have been the city council needs to be a constantly changing group of people, because at a volunteer basis. Because the problem is, if you have one person in that position too long, where they're procuring those services on behalf of the city, then sooner or later they might be making some deals a la crony capitalism. And so I think it's very important that in our city we don't have a group of people that constantly take care of all the business. I think that has to rotate on a very rapid basis with no compensation and the ability to watch what each other one's up to.
I actually really like the idea, and I've heard a similar concept to that. Basically turn city council into a jury serving style system, where people are selected by a limited group that say, yes, we believe in the following, get them to serve, get them to rotate, make sure they're not paid.
Right.
I am not wading into the anarchist versus minarchist debate right now.
So we've covered police, fire, and I'm actually glad we brought up private police, because since I'm on the topic of Atlanta and Sandy Springs, the Atlanta public school system, APS, has recently canceled their contracts with the Atlanta Police Department to provide security for all their schools. What they've decided to do instead is stand up their own privatized force internally. So I don't know how privatized a government entity system still is. That's like the IRS having their own police at a certain level. But it is interesting, because what they're finding is the coordination with public and private police and security forces, as you mentioned, casinos and otherwise. Vegas also sees this. The communication, coordination, and response time has massively increased. So public safety is higher because of private forces. Steel City is another example, and I'll let the panel continue to run with that.
Well, the great battle between Keynes and Hayek was the question of bottom up versus top down, and the argument that social democrats or big government types are always making against our side of the aisle is that we are completely anarchistic in a sense, is that they say that there is since we say the only fair is laissez-faire, that there are no plans. But Hayek rebutted this by arguing that it's not that there's no plans, it's that there are more planners. So in essence, the libertarian philosophy empowers a larger population to make those planning decisions for themselves. Now, Liberty City being a more micro example, right? We'd have to have, I think, some form of a regulatory body that would be a democratic body, which is simply that voting on which side of the road we drive on, but that can be minimalistic. But again, it's not that there is no plan. But planning really needs to start at the individual, which leads me to my final point with this, is that one of the challenges we face as libertarians is that when we're in our bubble thinking, we are such strong individualists that we believe in personal responsibility because we practice it. But there is a desire, there's always a desire in humans to have a simpler, easier, simple solution. So we're not going to hope that people are going to step in voluntarily. What happens in our city? And the statists come in and they start making the arguments that, we need to have a stronger security force. We need to start giving up more of our civil liberties, simply because of these threats that we have. And we have to have a real policy to address not what wouldn't be national security, but what would be city security, Now, yeah, of course we could have volunteers, right? Now, and the minarchist philosophy is the argument of the night watch, that the only legitimate role of the government is simply to be the night watch, adjudicate between contracts between individuals and police, fire, perhaps courts. But we don't have no plan. There are solutions that libertarians can promote, but they do require personal responsibility. We can talk all day long in here among ourselves as rugged individualists about what we believe and what we want and what we like. But the American people in many ways are dependent. So a Liberty City would in some ways be an outlier, and it would require all of these people to be hardy individualists. And that is a tall order for the people that in American society right now, the snowflakes who are, one big government to solve these problems.
I'm not sure that's going to be an area where I actually would probably disagree with you, Austin, where I don't think you need to be a rugged individualist to appreciate the benefits that come with free market capitalism. There are areas in which I am a rugged individualist. Areas like education, if and when I have kids, I'm going to certainly be homeschooling them. There's no possible way I would send them to a public school. But in other areas where I just don't know that much, I am the epitome of a snowflake. When it comes to plumbing, I just have plumbing insurance because I don't really know how to fix the pipes that are inside the wall. I mean, that's just stuff that I don't like to deal with. And the advantage of a free market capitalist system is not only for the people, in a free market city, is not just for the people who want to do everything themselves. Honestly, the people who I've met that are the best at doing everything themselves, including fixing plumbing and electricity, are actually immigrants from Russia because their communist system did not take care of them. And they had to learn or they just were not going to have electricity. So I actually believe the reverse, that actually because we're not forcing people to buy things that are stupid, because we're not forcing them to pay for a war on drugs, because we're not forcing them to pay for education that clearly doesn't work, because we're not forcing them to be the policemen of the world protecting everyone from everyone else. In Liberty City, they actually will have more money to take care, they can have gasoline. They're like, I don't really feel like filling up the gasoline in my car, somebody else do it for me. And I think that is just as strong and just as large a market for us as the hardcore libertarian rugged individualists.
Okay, you attacked me, now I get a response.
Fair point.
No,
30 seconds for Austin.
Yes, 30 seconds. So Mexico, the only problem is that because of how destructive capitalism is, we have these temporary panics. Because capitalism in its disruptive processes can sometimes result in fluctuations in pricing. A perfect example of this would be in Mexico recently. So we've heard about the civil unrest on the Mexican border. Why? Why did this happen? Well, it's because Mexico recently deregulated their oil and gas industry, and what they've done is they've taken PEMCO, I believe was the number one, Pemex is the number one provider of gasoline in Mexico. Well, when the government finally deregulated, they're now allowing some competition. There was we know it to be temporary price spike, because we know that eventually over the long term competition will drive down prices. But because of the erratic nature of the freedom, we can't always promise that prices will go down. And again, I hate confirmation bias. That's why I get in trouble with libertarians. Is because I'm willing to sort of I'm not always going to drink the Kool-Aid, right? Because we do sometimes, we can be Kool-Aid drinkers too. And it's water, but we have, in order for us to solve these problems, we're going to have to address those kinds of things, right? So if there is a price fluctuation and the prices shoot up, people are going to complain. And they're going to say, well, and now what the Mexicans are doing is they are blaming free market capitalism for the increase in prices because they're too impatient to wait for the plumbers to step in and solve the problem. That's what it is that we'll have a temporary crisis. And of course, FDR prolonged the Great Depression with his actions. We had crises before, but government extends these crises. How we argue to the people to say, listen, okay, yeah, everybody's freaking out, but you have to allow the marketplace to work. That is a very difficult sell to people because, for example, 1929, monetary crisis, the crash. We've had other scares in the United States. After 9/11, people are scared when crowds, when their crowd behavior can be spooked, and that's when they cry out for government to solve the solution. So how we can not mollify, but try and help American people and whoever is in Liberty City, if they fear a threat, if they see what they call market failure, which we know to be a temporary fluctuation, how we ease our fellow citizens through the temporary suffering of panics which do occur and have occurred throughout American history, that's the rub, right? Because it's the temporary panics where the social democrats step in and say, never let a crisis go to waste, and they impose government increases.
There is, though, a very critical difference, which is panics are most long-lived, most destructive when you have a single source and a single crop. When you have one currency, that currency is likely to fail. In liberty, when you have Bitcoin and gold and silver and copper and all the other cryptocurrencies that are competing with Bitcoin, could they all fail at the same time? I mean, theoretically, but the odds are much less. What's more likely is that one will fail and people will go to everything else. The same thing happens in all parts of the market. You know, so for example, we've had situations in which one type of phone, like the Samsung S7, was shown to be a fire hazard. A lot of people just simply didn't care. They liked the phone too much anyway. But other people said, listen, maybe the S7 isn't the right thing for me. I can pick any one of these other things. And so in Liberty City, and I think also brings up a really good point here, we need to make sure that it is resistant to unnecessary market fluctuations. When it comes to finance, that means it should be very, 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 very easy to start a stock exchange. When it comes to currency, you should be able to use anything you want. When it comes to schools and education, whatever education you like. And that leads to the resilience. That is the nature of a capitalist economy. It is resilient when it's not being restricted into and essentially having everybody forced to put all of their eggs in a single basket.
I would also add that Liberty City, since we're starting fresh with the city, we are not starting with that forceful government that makes people react to it. And so like what happened in Mexico with Pemex, you know, it was a state-owned distribution channel. And then when they looked to deregulate, the cartels took over. And so the cartels wouldn't have done that had it weren't for the fact that they had a very strong and intrusive government. And so basically in Liberty City, we didn't have that government leaning on everything. So we don't have the same issues when it comes to market adjustment when we get rid of it, because it never existed in the first place.
So what about the protection of the goods and services as so outside of Liberty City, right? We've got free trade, right? Perhaps some other people don't, but we've got to get goods and services through the Strait of Hormuz, for example. Should the corporations that are transporting those goods and services pay for their own security to ensure that we can maintain free trade? Because the neoconservative argument is that it's the Hamiltonian argument, essentially the mercantilist argument, is that portions of our tax money which goes to security is to secure free trade, which is why they argue for an imperialist form of policy, which is the argument to if you've got Somali pirates around the Horn of Africa and you're trying to get oil through, then perhaps the American military, their argument is to ensure that, right? Free trade overseas. What do we do if we're attacked, right? And we're alone, and can we contract with outside agencies? If the government of France steps in like they did on our revolution, can we create those alliances in order for us to defend ourselves? Because the hoplite farmers, the Icelandic Godord, were all those experiments in anarchy were eventually subsumed. They were eventually annexed. Hawaii annexed, right? And almost every shining city, Singapore, Hong Kong, right? As soon as we create a shining jewel, we better be ready with some nuclear missiles pointed outwards. Because if they come and they want to take what we have, and they are larger or more powerful, we better be skilled in the art of war.
I think it's really good to look at what governments don't want, because that's pretty much the thing that's going to lead to freedom. I think there's a saying that with due respect to our last vice presidential candidate, where he pointed out that an automatic weapon is a military weapon. It's arguably a weapon of mass destruction. And to me, that is the whole point. That is the reason why we want them, because it is such a devastating weapon. I believe that Liberty City should be armed, that the individual should be allowed to be armed with whatever weapons they want, because that is what it takes to keep people safe.
Nukes? We can have nukes?
should individuals in Liberty City be allowed to have nukes? If somebody has the wherewithal, the competence to build an infrastructure larger than that of most countries, they have the state calmness and presence of mind to build something that's so advanced, so scientific, requires so many resources. That to me is not a hot-headed lunatic. That to me is somebody that is really, that person is a much, let me put it this way, that person is a much less hot-headed lunatic than all the people in the world right now who have their fingers on that button. Woo!
Good to say, but I think I might call bullshit on that. And the reason why is because, if the Japanese had gotten nuclear weapons, or if the Germans had gotten nuclear weapons in World War II, would they have used them against us? You're damn right they would. And so without some form of security that is a collective security, if we could be easily taken over because of our willingness to be more pacifistic, perhaps, right? We don't intervene in the affairs of other countries, but as you know, if you don't intervene in the affairs of other countries, that doesn't mean that they won't intervene in your affairs. So there needs to be, porcupines have quills for a reason, people. And I do get concerned with a bit of the overly pacifistic strain that is, I think, utopian. And weapons of mass destruction are the type of thing where if perhaps a private billionaire could get recreational nukes, maybe you can have them. But however, when I see an opponent across the river building a claymore sword, I don't automatically assume his intentions are to slaughter cows or something like that. If you see someone like Kim Jong-un, perfect example. If you see Kim Jong-un blasting missiles off, and if you know that he's a nuclear capable country, you put it's just, I think it's even perfectly in line with the NAP to point the gun back, essentially, because acts of aggression are not just the initiation of physical violence. Threats themselves can be countered sometimes with physical force, or perhaps even violence. If somebody says, "I've got a gun, I'm going to kill you," well, it can probably kill you. You may have an argument of self-defense there. So there does have to be, I think, a realistic logistical defense plan that may require more than just private guards with 38 pistols. How we deal with these issues in Liberty City on the macro scale, I'll leave up to debate. But I do worry about the recreational nuke question. I won't say you can't have a recreational nuke, Arvin. I wouldn't stop you from trying to get a recreational nuke. But if you made threats at me before and you were building a nuke, I might start one too, or I might engage in subterfuge. I might even engage in manipulation. I might even consider that in my self-defense, that the initiation of some sort of action which would stop you from getting that weapon would be in my own self-interest, would be in my own self-defense interests. So this lies at the heart of libertarian philosophy, a rational, sane defense plan for Liberty City. I think is absolutely critical for our continued survival. People who hammer their swords into plows will plow for those who do not.
Well, one thing, if I can respond to that a little bit, I don't think that it is correct to assume that the main or even primary form of warfare in the modern era is physical force. I think that we have shown that with trade, we can win cultural wars very, very quickly. And that when we isolate our most brutal and most powerful weapon, which is not nuclear weapons, it is our ideas. Our ideas are dangerous because they're good. And because when people hear about them, they like them. We end up with what we've seen with some of our, most in the past scariest and most forbidding enemies. If you look at, for example, the people in China, the youth in China, the college students in China, they're adopting a more and more capitalistic, free market, individual rights perspective at an individual level. Not to say that China is great, but that we are winning them over far more than we are by the current isolationism we're using with North Korea. North Korea isn't exposed to American ideas because it doesn't benefit them. But let's say we turn that around. Let's say we've opened a true, complete, no sanction, absolute free trade with North Korea, with the ultimate evil enemy. here are some of the things that would happen. See, the thing about trades doesn't happen, as Austin would be the first to tell you, it's not going to happen without advertising. It's not going to happen without marketing. And if that guy, if that business in North Korea wants to sell a t-shirt or something to Americans, he's going to learn about American culture. And that means his designers and his marketing people are going to learn about American culture. Their family members are going to be hearing about these things about American culture. And all of a sudden, we're getting those ideas into that culture. And if North Korea, over time, becomes culturally more and more similar to the United States, honestly, who cares if they have nukes? Right now, their nukes are dangerous because they're an isolated country, but they're isolated largely because we're isolating them. And I say let our more powerful weapons, our cultural weapons, do what physical violence has proved itself unable to do against even non-nuclear powers, against even people who are hiding in caves and tents with the kind of gun that I wouldn't even buy for my little sister.
We need to add to this as well.
It's an interesting evolution listening to this conversation, because we started out as a home rule city, probably in Colorado or Nebraska. That's my vote. And we've moved to sort of an Athenian city-state that needs nukes. We've traveled a long ways in
Recreational
an hour.
nukes.
Yeah, recreational nukes in the last hour. So.
That's where I was going as well. Yeah. The fact that we started off as a city within the confines of the United States, and now we're talking about technical nukes. So I think that where it really comes down to it, the real threat to our city is not military weapons. It's infiltration from other cities that might like our resources, that want to somehow get in, take over our ability to self-rule, and try and rule themselves. I think that's the real threat to the city.
Well, on the issue of free trade, I mean,
If I may reiterate for a minute, it sounds like overall I can simplify the discussion and put it into one word, and that's maintaining autonomy. How does the Liberty City itself maintain autonomy? But I think we're running close on our time here, so I want to thank the panel for the entertaining discussion tonight. I hope the audience has enjoyed it. I personally want to extend a good thank you for maintaining such an interesting conversation, working with the topics, and also expanding on them. I really like the discussion tonight. I think we made some interesting progress, and I think we say that eventually we'll all be standing together one day and saying, President Trump, tear down that wall.
nice.
Hold on.
Thanks, Senator.
Thanks for moderating.
We are a strong and independent breed here in Colorado. We have the courage to question authority, to demand changes. The status quo is far less important in Colorado than the concept of right or wrong. We're brave enough to use that pioneer vision to blaze trails not previously traveled. The great state of Colorado is the right place for a new revolution. A peaceful revolution based in common sense. A peaceful revolution that would be open to the truth and be brave enough to make decisions based in truth, rather than a willingness to simply accept that which is forced upon us. It is for these reasons and so many more that the time is right for Colorado to once again be the pioneer to making things better in such a way that the rest of the nation will follow suit. I'm sure that we've all noticed that there's a pervasive mood of mistrust of government. This is an earned situation, and there's a long road ahead to reinstate the public trust. With trust, goodwill, reason, and temperance are imperative in showing our prosperity and individual happiness, and all are essential to a peaceful society. I propose a change that will move us in the direction of peace and in the direction of reason. I have a question for you. Do you think our brave men and women in law enforcement chose their careers to become armed collectors for the state? I don't think so. Not at all. But that's what we forced them to be in many cases. So how do we use our Colorado ingenuity to show the cash-hungry government who's supposed to be in charge, and how we will once again seize control? Today, I introduced two ballot initiatives that comprise my campaign that I call stop the shakedowns. So, what is a shakedown? A shakedown is an entity of government hyper-enforcing meaningless infractions for the purpose of generating fine revenue payable to themselves. So who does this? Cities, counties, the state, federal government? And in case you're not completely approving of the fact that government attacks us for money, here are a few examples. If a speed trap were about safety, and this guy makes people slow down, why would they arrest him? Because there's some places that they do that. You warn about a speed trap, you're going to go to jail. It's not about the safety, my friends. It's not. It's about the money, and it needs to stop. So, fines or penalties are not required to be paid to the fining entity. All fines, forfeitures, and penalties are fully satisfied with a payment equal to the fine or forfeiture or penalty by the penalized individual or corporate entity to a person damaged by the activity in question, or a donation to a legitimate charity of the penalized person's choice anywhere in the United States of America. So, this would send a pretty strong message nationwide. If we can pull this off, not only are we going to end a lot of the terrible, terrible things that are done to us, I mean, we need to move government back from just an entity that's trying to get money from us in any way they possibly can. These are strong messages, and I really hope you'll all join me in helping get this thing, make this a reality. So thank you again, and one more slide there. Oh, well, we got our cash generator, and then one more. And one more. There we go. Stand together to stop the shakedowns. And this is what I'm trying to create here. So I hope you all approve. I would encourage you to contact me if you'd like to help push this thing along. But I just think this is just the best thing we could do right now. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention. You all have a great night. Most of you are probably connected with me through Facebook, but that's probably the best way to do that. You can also send an email to steve.kerbel@aol.com, or you can contact me, Steve Kerbel, through Facebook. So that's Kerbel. So thanks again. Any other questions? I think we're good. All right, have a good night. Oh, yes, one more, Eric.
When are you running for governor?
I am not ready to declare at this point. I hope to run, but there's a few hurdles I have to get over. But it is still something I'm exploring, but I am not in a position to declare tonight. Sorry. Okay. Anything else? I think we're good.
Guys, I want to tell you a little bit about Steve Kerbel. When he was running for president last year, I called him. We had a newly formed development group in Douglas County. I called Steve to see if he could take a few minutes out of his busy schedule to come speak at our group.
Charity, or if there are any victims, restitution towards those victims. It basically takes away I really believe that one of the problems we face also with the mood we all have toward law enforcement is because we're afraid that they're just coming to take our money. Well, you know what? Like I said, I don't think they wanted that either. And so this law, which basically would allow people to satisfy their fines with moving their money to a place of their choice, but the person with the gun and the mask can never have the money, then there's no sense in hyper-enforcement. There's no sense. You know what goes away? Speed traps go away. And in addition to that, market conduct exams for regulators are more about finding out if something's really wrong and not about hitting you at gunpoint. I had another issue. Once again, I have lots of experience with regulators. They're my friends. But I can tell you that also the Department of Insurance, or Division of Insurance here in Colorado, is very much into fining. I'll give you an example. Because they get to keep the money. I had a claim where a claim rep failed, allegedly, to ask a customer who was injured, "How are you feeling today?" Literally. Person makes a complaint with the Division of Insurance. And instead of laughing it away, the Division of Insurance sends off a list of 23 interrogatories that you must answer in order and improper or you are in trouble. Then they sent a follow-up list of about 20 more, which went to the wrong address. I was fined $550. And guess who got to keep it? The Division of Insurance. They can't do that if we can pass this law. So really what happens is, it takes away the desire of government to act in a mafioso style to collect cash. And it also means that the spirit of the laws are enforced. You know, and not that all of us are into force, we're really not. But the fact is, some enforcement based on judicious reason is a lot better than just sticking us all up for cash, don't you think? And I'm pretty sure that if we could pass this ballot initiative, not only are we going to prove the pioneers that we are as far as fighting for freedom and being the first at doing things towards freedom, we might just start a national trend toward this. And think about how our legislators are going to think when they realize that the whole country is banding up against their desire to take cash. Colorado Springs, perfect example in speeding tickets. I stick on those because we've all had to deal with them. In Colorado Springs, you get a speeding ticket, you go to court, they will lower the points, but they will never lower the fine. What's it about, my friends? It's about the money, right? So, I really think what happens is it doesn't stop enforcement, it doesn't stop protection, it doesn't stop safety. It stops people from taking advantage of us and taking our money at gunpoint for the purpose of whatever they want to use it for. Now, in my discussions about this, it became obvious to me that if we do this by itself, there's a problem. Problem is, they're going to ramp up civil asset forfeiture, aren't they? Okay? So that is the second point, the second initiative that needs to be introduced with this, is we need to make civil asset forfeiture against the law in the state of Colorado. Another very small cartoon you might be able to see, but we have a drug war bureaucrat with a big old suitcase of money telling the bank robbers to get out of the way, saying, "Step aside, amateurs, I have a deposit to make." So, if only we could stop the drug war at the state level, that'd be even better. So, what I'm hoping is that the Libertarian Party of Colorado will see merit in these initiatives, and we'll get together to work towards getting these things on the ballot and getting them passed, and show an example for the entire United States that, well, to steal a phrase from a movie, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. So, time to take the lead, and just for interest's sake, I will read what we have. You know, these, of course, will require a lot more massaging, but the civil asset forfeiture law says, effective immediately, the state of Colorado and all government jurisdictions within the state of Colorado shall not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Civil asset forfeiture is hereby prohibited in the state of Colorado. And this is the other stop the shakedown rule. In the interest of peaceful cooperation between the people of the state of Colorado and all enforcement entities within the state of Colorado, any and all if it were about safety, a visible patrol car in traffic, as I said before, would result in people slowing down. So why hide with unmarked traffic enforcement if we're not about the cash? In several states, there are speeding violations on the books that, for example, in Arizona and New Mexico, if you're going 65 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, yep, they'll give you a ticket, but they've also codified the fact that it's not enough of a danger so that your insurance company can charge you more for the risk. So that is transparent as it gets, I'm pretty sure. So that they basically said with that law, it is not about the safety. And so, next. Now we talk about regulation, market conduct exams, and complaint fines. I can tell you my experience. I spent decades as a CEO of insurance companies. And I can tell you that when the Department of Insurance or the Department of anything comes to calling with a market conduct exam, they're going to find something. And I can tell you a personal experience I had. I had a market conduct from the Colorado Division of Insurance a couple years ago. And they were very upset with me. Now, why is that? My rates were all right. The claims were all paid on time. They didn't have anything to fine me on. They were very upset. So what did they do? Well, they came up with trying to find, okay, well, this is a little bit specific, but I'll share it anyway. In Colorado, there is a rule that says you need to have a plan in place in case you pay medical payment claims in excess of 30 days. Well, all of our claims were paid within 10. But no, we didn't have this provision. We didn't need it. $14,000 to the Colorado Division of Insurance, thank you very much. That's what it was about. If they can't find something wrong, they're going to dig and dig and dig until they can take more money from you. So, what this brings up is the first solution to the problem. Starve the beast. If government is not allowed to receive any revenue from fines in any way, shape, or form, excessive enforcement goes away. I rob the liquor store if you can't keep the money, right? And that's the way I look at it. We need to pass a law in the state of Colorado that says any, or something to this effect, we're still working on the verbiage, however, if any fine is levied by any city, county, or state entity, it can be fully satisfied with an in-kind donation to a legitimate